I'll be talking about harnessing the power of data, and we all use it for insights, but now even more for automation. So I'll take you through the journey of how we are helping a lot of customers using a lot of Google technologies. And before I begin with that, I would like to introduce myself. I lead the Southeast Asia business for Sears. It means a really fine stainer, which actually kind of what we do. We separate noise from a lot of value, and we add value for our customers. I've been in management consulting on the innovation side of things for over a decade now. Have worked for companies like Deloitte in the past, IDC, and now leading the business here with Sears. 12 plus locations. We have 1,800 plus customers or partners. We have been, this includes Southeast Asia markets where we have active customers. We will be joined later by a customer. We are very grateful. I'll talk about that more. And of course, one of the largest, partners for Google in the region. We have 170 plus associate and professional certifications. That's what our journey looks like. We have been with Google for 12 plus years. Very humble beginnings, like any other startup. We ourselves have been a startup. About 14 plus years in the business. The journey began with our CEO, in a two-room bedroom apartment. And now we are 600 plus, as you saw. Even before we were, kind of doing re-engineering and doing a lot of consulting and cloud, we were helping a lot of organizations collaborate better with G Suite. So we have 1,500 plus customers onboarded, deployed G Suite. 500,000 plus, or 500,000 employees we have helped onboard on G Suite. That's a lot of numbers, and that's 12 plus years of work together with Google. We work across the Google stack of technologies, which is why you also see maps there. So we help a lot of organizations with location intelligence. We offer organizations with map solutions as well, working along with Google, helping them offer managed services, a lot of use cases around store locators, helping ride-hailing companies as well, working with their technical teams to ensure that they have the right engineering capabilities as well as the product know-how to develop these applications. In fact, we work with more than 1,000 startups in the past years, and I will show a representative list of that. We also develop products on top of this platform, on the Google Cloud platform. Happier Work, which you see there. It's been there for about 10 plus years now. It's a human resource management system. It sits on Google Cloud Engine and has 30,000 plus employees using it. Again, we built a lot of automation into it. We all know everybody does performance reviews. For instance, I'll just give you one use case here. Performance reviews are as part of our automated workflow here. If you're doing these reviews once in a 3 months time frame, the platform will set it up for you, find out your calendar, your reportee's calendar, and it will do that, and you will have all that available. Same for the hiring process, and it tightly integrates with G Suite. So we bring in a lot of automation and bots as well, which is including chatbots, which is a hot topic. So a lot of automation and different ways of doing things that is powered by a lot of Google technologies and a lot of improvisation that we bring on top of it by working with customers. So we are bringing that change, and we position ourselves as a digital advisory firm that helps future-proof businesses. Recognic is another one. Again, a platform, a solution that we have built on top of Google Cloud Platform as well as computer vision APIs and document AIs. And I'll talk a bit more in a bit more detail, but think of it as an intelligent automation process technology. That's a representative list of our partners. A lot of them, many of them would be familiar names for many of you, as you could see. But what we work with, as I said, 1,000 plus startups. Many of them are unicorns today. A lot of enterprises that we go to also want this knowledge of how do startups operate. And they want to emulate, or they want to make sure that they are actually also in the same league. They have the same agility as many of the startups have. We are working with a lot of enterprises in their data transformation journey, infrastructure modernization, moving towards Kubernetes, as well as ensuring that they are adopting the best practices around DevOps culture. how they can basically become more agile and their engineering and technology teams become more agile is where we work. So you can see a lot of enterprises as well. And wouldn't want to kind of pat my back myself, but yes, thanks to all our customers and partnerships that we have with these customers, we have been 4-time Google Partner of the Year in a row, so we would not want to change that. We hope to continue that, and will, it's all thanks to all the partnership approach that we see with a lot of, customers that we work with and their engineering teams and practitioners like you. Now, talking about customers, we serve customers from, as I said, across the spectrum, from different verticals, from different, but we are most excited about, of course, a lot of startups who are changing the way things work. And I have the privilege to have with me today CEO of one such company, LifeSight. And I would like to announce, I would like to invite Mr. Tobin Thomas, who is the CEO of LifeSight, for a quick chat. Have been a customer. Tobin? All right, great. So thanks so much for joining us, Tobin. It's been, a good journey so far for us, I'm sure even for LifeSight. So why don't you tell us about yourself and your journey first with LifeSight?
So LifeSight started as a couple of years back in Malaysia. Because we were looking into what Google is doing. So basically, Google indexes websites or people's consumer behavior in the online world. So we were looking for, there is a gap to understand people's offline behavior, right? What is that he's interacting with in the real world? Where exactly a consumer goes? How often he travels? What is his behavior in the real world, kind of a thing. So we felt that there is a large gap in that specific thing. So we started indexing the real world, right? So having a places database and then working with GPS signals and Wi-Fi signals and figuring out what is the real world behavior of a consumer and making that available for enterprises, right? So this idea came up to us a couple of years back in Malaysia. We built the company there, then make the solutions available for enterprises, right? So that's exactly what LifeSight does right now. But we have a few other solutions that we are planning for a larger diaspora of market, right? Yeah, so that's exactly what we do.
Great. As we all know, and this track is about data and analytics and insights, and that's what exactly LifeSight does for its customers. So why don't you take us through maybe one or two examples of how you are helping some of your customers?
Sure. Let me take 2 examples.
Okay.
So we work with one of the telcos back in Singapore where they have presence in a few countries in Asia Pacific. So telcos have got a unique problem. I mean, they know a lot of information about their own consumers for sure, because telcos collect a lot of data of their own customers. But there could be few informations that probably they wouldn't know about the consumer. There could be some dark spots for them, right? They will definitely know the gender. They will know a lot of demographic information. They will know probably the home location of the consumer. But there is definitely a lot of dark spot the telco wouldn't understand about the consumer. So LifeSight try filling those gaps, which probably the telco don't know about the consumer. It could be the home location. It could be the work location. It could be what he does in the real world. What does he interact with? It could be like what sort of content he's browsing. And what sort of devices he's carrying. I mean, there could be hundreds of those data points which we provide to that telco. So this is about consumers that the telco own, that he has. There is another larger set of problem where no telco is like a monopoly. No telcos know everything about a specific country or all the consumers, right? So there is a lot of consumers which is outside the telco's network, which probably they want to acquire, right? And we know those consumers.
Right.
So we give those data points, or we enrich those data points back to the telco and say that this consumer, these set of consumers are consuming this kind of content. There is a high chance that the consumer will convert because he's got another network on his home. He's in a different IP at his home. All bunch of information. So the telco probably will use those data for maybe network optimization. They will use it for site planning. They will use it for advertising. I don't know. I mean, they will use it for 100 different use cases. But we work with telcos and those kind of stuff. That's with telco. We also work with a couple of fintech companies. Fintech, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, fintech is the most sought about industry right now, right? I mean, it's very hot now. But And within fintech, I mean, there are a few things like lending, which is basically micro lending. So micro lending is typically done to those people who are underbanked. They doesn't have a credit score. They don't have a credit history because they don't own a credit card. They don't own a debit card. They are technically not banked at all, right? But how do you still give a loan? It could be a $100 loan. It could be a micro loan. But how do you make a decision still to lend to that person, right? That consumer. But that's a vast market. Look at countries like Indonesia and India, that a very significant portion of the population wouldn't be banked at all, right? So serving them, it could be a savings account, or it could be some sort of a lending to them. It's like a massive opportunity. So how do you still score the consumer?
Sure.
Right? Because you don't have a credit history, you don't have anything that you know about that person. So we help those fintech companies to understand that, okay, easy living in a specific place, what probably could be his affluence score, right? What does he do in the real world? What is that he's interacting with? So we give a few data points which will make the fintech companies, so these kind of companies, to take some sort of decisions. I wouldn't say that the fintech companies will just depend on LifeSite alone. They will have multiple data points that they depend on. But they will definitely be depending on a few data points that we give to make a decision on whether to lend or not to lend.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So these are a couple of examples that we solve.
Sure. And I think these are a lot of variety of data, right? You said you mentioned weather data as well that you look into, and maybe a lot of this about consumers, multiple channels, and all that, bringing that together. And that of course comes also with the power of cloud, right? And LifeSite moved into Google Cloud, and I'll probably ask you, what made you move to Google Cloud?
Not just a promise of having a cheaper option. No, that wasn't the reason. So when LifeSet started like a couple of years before, we were only dealing with few data sets. We were dealing with a set of places database, so we have a places DB, and we were also dealing with GPS and Wi-Fi signals. So this is where we started, right? But the real world data is not about that alone, right? There is weather data, there is telematics, IoT, there is a lot of public data, like government data, like sensors and traffic data. There are tons of data out there. So we, almost a year back, we took this project of not just depending on the first two data sets, can we bring in all these data together and make sense out of those data, right? And then resolve back to a location, because LifeSet is all about location, right? So can we make sense of sensors versus telematics versus IoT? So all these data, can we bring it down to a specific location and make it available? So this was a massive project, which means that this data is all real time, not just two data sets that we used to handle, but dealing data in terabytes, and giving answers to enterprises in pretty much real time. I mean, that's a very hard task, right? So one of the biggest reasons for that, or the shift from the previous vendor to GCP, was that we wanted an infrastructure which can handle these kind of data in real time, so that the enterprises are not affected, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest reason. So it was thought through. We went through this process for almost a year's time, right? And just that you guys contacted when we spoke to each other, and then this transition happened. But it was always thought through that we need to move. Sure. It is not because of the fact that the previous vendor was bad or the previous vendor didn't service us. But I don't think these geospatial queries or these kind of geospatial intelligence was possible in another vendor, right? So choosing Google was like a
natural
kind of natural.
Okay.
Kind of
Yeah, I think most of us in the room will agree of the power of that Google brings in terms of the data crunching abilities, and also downstream from there. We have been a partner in the journey with you, and it is nothing, since you're here, how has your journey been with us?
It's a yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, ask you.
And I'm a business guy, so that answer will have to be given by my tech guys,
Sure.
technically. But, I mean, see, we are a startup, right? And we've been doing this transition for almost 3 months, maybe. And whenever I visit our research center back in Bangalore, I see your guys with my guys logged in a room. And that's quite comforting, right? I mean, we're such a small startup. We are not at the size of any of those companies that you were showing here. But then still, your engineer sitting down with my guys, logged in a room, trying to solve this transition thing. And that was quite comforting. I mean, I don't find any problem yet,
Yeah.
right?
We'll not try to change that. We will be with you, not trying to give you any troubles, definitely. In terms of what's next, where do you see life site going next? Tell us about kind of your vision.
Okay.
If we talk about looking ahead, what does it look like for life site?
Well, interesting question. See, before we started, like I told, we were dealing with few data sets. Now we're dealing with more data sets, right? What we are taking up right now is to bring in all these data sets together, so transform it, process it, and also make this data available through APIs for enterprises to consume. So that a large bank or an insurance company or a fintech company or a telco needn't worry about bringing this data, process it, and then think about building an analytics tool or anything. So we are trying to make these data, the real world data, available through APIs. So basically, we are trying to create an infrastructure. So if you are trying to solve an urban planning use case, you're trying to solve a retail analytic use case, you're trying to solve anything related to location intelligence. It could be retail analytics, it could be urban planning, it could be site selection use cases, or outdoor analytics, or advertisement, or any of those kind of use cases which needs real-world data. You didn't bother about buying it, transforming it, and then processing it and all this stuff. So we have the infrastructure. So technically, any enterprise can plug into the infrastructure which LifeSite has built through APIs, and you're good to go in a few minutes, right?
Sure.
That's exactly one of the reasons why we moved. So that's a project that we have taken up right now. And incidentally, we just launched the product today morning. So I believe for the next couple of years, that is what we will do. We also, another thing that we're building, another thing that we are doing right now is we are building a search-based data intelligence tool, which means that a CEO in an enterprise will have, rather than giving him inputs and dashboards, basically giving graphs on what, so for example, if you are a CEO of an enterprise, retail enterprise, he will have questions like, is my store at the right place? How many people are coming to the store? Where are they coming from? What sort of impact opening hours and closing hours of a store has got on his business, and so on and so forth. So basically, a CEO has got a lot of doubts, right? So look at what Google has done. You can technically ask any question to Google, you get an answer. So you get a couple of options, a right answer or a few options like that. We're trying to bring in that to enterprises. We're not going to give any charts or anything. We are trying to give it, you can technically ask any question. It's search-based data intelligence. You can ask a question, you get an answer in return, right? If the query is on real-world intelligence. So we're trying to build. It's a large project that we have taken up. I think 2020, we are trying to launch that. So these are the two things that we have picked up.
Sure.
So that's how, that probably would be the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Tobin. I think it will be great if we can talk to data and interact with data in a more interactive and intuitive way as you laid out. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for being a customer and a partner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the next segment and continue the discussion. What do these companies have in common? One, of course, these are all great companies. Red Doors, Tata Steel, and Plexus, yes, Google technology is powering them, but also us. We have been working with these companies hand in hand in terms of making sure that they are able to leverage the best out of the technologies that Google offers. Now, that is a long and complex process often. You have the technology, but how do you actually put it to good use? What is the best use case for your business? Plexus is one of these customers, which is Germany-based, a very interesting one that I would like to highlight, where a lot of, what they do is they help actually pharmaceutical companies in their drug discovery process. Now think about this. They parse 20,000 pages per second. And in the previous infrastructure that they had, they were doing it at the rate of 1,000 pages per second. So that actually improved by a factor of 20. Basically, in the process, as we know in clinical data, it's a pretty complex process, a lot of regulations around it, and a lot of way in terms of how papers are written and research papers are written. How do you make context and awareness out of this? That's where the power of Google technology comes in, and we have worked with them in terms of making sure that they have the right infrastructure to crunch this humongous amount of data that they have. Tata Steel is another great example where one of the issues that a lot of organizations face is they have a data lake. How do you actually create the data lake is not a difficult question, but what do you use it for? And a lot of customers that we go to are saying that, well, yes, we have a data lake. Now we are also struggling with the use cases and, of course, with the variety of data that they would want to add and at the speed that they want to add. Those are some of the areas where we are helping customers, and also on the collaboration side, as I said, Red Doors on the G Suite and collaboration. A lot of organizations are investing in digital transformation. they are not paying off in many cases, or they are not meeting their stated objectives. And one of the reasons is because they're not changing the way their employees work. And that's where probably broader G Suite story also comes in. Now, creating insights from data, as I said, is a more complex process than just a technology process. There needs to be kind of what do you need from the business? What is the minimum common denominator that business wants to reach? Do you want to do event processing or batch processing? And what's the right tools to use? So we help as part of that process, right from the ETL process to downstream analytics to visualization. All these technologies are available to you, including on the, in the entire Google stack of technologies. In many cases, you can use open source technologies as well. And we work with you as part of your engineering team. In many cases, as I said, these are questions of data governance. How do we ensure that the right access policies and controls are implemented? And there's a lot of hard work that goes before you can actually finalize and use all these technologies together, right from, as I said, ETL to the visualization layer. And how do you then activate this data? That's another big challenge a lot of organizations face today. Well, we have the right data lake, and I meet a lot of CXOs, CIOs. They have the insights, they have the dashboards, but what next? Now, how do you create these what next options? What are the next best options available? Or what are the decisions that should be tied to? And that's where workflows come in. How do you actually tie it to some of these, whether these are thresholds that you set for your organization? You have brought all this together, but you also need to ensure that there is a feedback loop in terms of workflows. And that's where, again, we come in. And for example, in the case of Tata Steel, they are also using a lot of geospatial data. There is geo-tagging done on their assets. And if these are, as we all know, many cases, there could be geofencing data. How do you bring all this together into a workflow? This could be for manufacturing purposes, for instance, where in manufacturing companies, another very interesting example is where we are helping a company in terms of identifying their scrap using computer vision technologies. Now, how do you create the workflow after that is also an important piece. So once you have a solid data foundation, in many cases, organizations are in that journey somewhere. You have some of the data tools, technologies, some form of data lake in there, or dashboards already available. How do you move to automation? And I think, as we discussed earlier, Google, again, potentially offers the deepest set of technologies out there. And that comes from the power that Google does in terms of the data crunching that happens on Google Search, but also on Google Maps, like 25 million records per day. How do you put all this data to good use? Now, there could be three ways you can think about it. If you're a large enterprise bank, in many cases, you would want to set up your own infrastructure. You are probably, you have done a POC. You have decided that, yes, this is good for us. We want to go the AI route. You will want to set up your AI infrastructure. That would come in form of cloud TPUs. You will set up your own networking technologies as well as compute. You'll decide your infrastructure, and that's where also we come in. We decide what is the right size infrastructure, what is the networking technologies that you need to think about, and latency needs, for instance, if you are thinking about all of these. Now, if you want to move to the next level, which is on the platform and libraries and tools, maybe you do not necessarily want to set up all of the infrastructure yourself today. And you want to actually test some POCs. And that's where you have a lot of tools, again, available, from BigQuery to Data Lab to TensorFlow. You want to run machine learning models and test some of your, do some proof of concepts. If you are a manufacturing company and you're looking to see, what are these churn models or churn propensity models, and that all is also possible right out of the box where you can use it. And finally, on the perception services, when you move to the next level of artificial intelligence, how do you actually use natural language processing to help? We are already seeing a lot of applications, for example, in contact center, also in use of speech-to-text applications. Video intelligence, another big area of application for disaster management, for instance. As I said, we are working in this case with a company which is actually where we are working on ensuring that they have a lot of scrap and how they grade scrap. In this case, it's image recognition technology that is being used. So there are a lot of examples and use cases of some of these companies which are using, and we are working with them in terms of their vision or using other artificial intelligence tools. On vision, we built, as I said, a platform on top of Google Vision APIs and Document AI. which basically helps extract information from documents. And these documents could be of different types. It helps understand documents. These could be identity documents. These could be any other form of document. You input it in form of PDFs or JPEG files, and you can have a JSON output, or other forms of output, and then workflows along with it. So you can do validation, which was being done manually potentially earlier. And again, it is available through APIs for consumption. We have a customer already, which is in production. And here is an example of how it is actually helping them reduce time by 70%. Now, this customer, they receive close to 1 million documents every month. And there is a manual process for them to actually, being an insurer, to validate that the identity documents are correct. But there's also another problem in health insurance, where a lot of health insurance firms would ask you for medical tests. And now, if you are thinking about, and this is a customer in India, but even here in Singapore, we have so many diagnostic labs and clinics. If you take a look at their reports, everyone will be different. The format will be different. Yeah, the blood sugar levels will not change. The blood pressure levels will not be different of what is medically prescribed. But the format is very different. In this case, we are actually training the system for 2,600 diagnostic labs. So it kind of automates the entire process of your onboarding customers for an insurance company. And all this process was being done manually earlier. Now you can think about this, of how you can improve, basically, of course, help save time, but faster time to market for you, but also in terms of your customers. Again, less than 30 seconds to process a document, and that's all it takes. This is also available in multiple languages. We are already testing this for other Southeast Asian languages, and the results are good. We have a fintech customer also in Singapore using this solution. This is for a trading platform, and they validate Hong Kong passports, NRIC numbers, as well as NRIC cards, as well as the Singapore passport. And actually, there are also 15 types of documents that we help validate. Also, Saxo forms, people who are familiar with trading, these are also required. And it is also being validated using the same solution. It is in production today. And in fact, for this customer, particular customer for ICICI Prudential, it's more than 15 types of documents. And of course, all the 2,600 medical and diagnostic labs that I spoke about earlier. Now, when we think about artificial intelligence, often we go towards just automation. Yes, it is true, it helps with automation. But the up-and-coming area of generative adversarial networks or generative designs is a very interesting area. And it kind of at the cusp of automation and creativity. And when artificial intelligence kind of meets creativity, it is a very interesting space. Can artificial intelligence create something? It can help automate. It is doing today, as we know, through RPA, through intelligent process automation, a lot of workflows automation. Also predictive models, which we know from statistics are possible with certain degree of probability. Now here in this case, artificial intelligence is trying to design, and the system is actually coming up with watch designs. This is for one of the top 5 watch manufacturers by volumes. And we helped develop a deep learning model using GANs, again here. And these are the variables. The traditional way is a watch designer will design a watch using the usual tools of sketching the designs or creating prototypes. But in this case, the artificial intelligence, the algorithm is producing watch images. So these are images which are produced by artificial intelligence. We know, and I'm sure many of us have seen images of artificial people, but here is a real-world application where the watch designs are being created by an algorithm. And these are some of the parameters that you can set. So you set band color, dial color, gender, and you also have some past history. Now, this past history could be this band color or size worked great with, was one of the most successful models, and it worked great with women or, with men. And you put all those input parameters, and here you go. You have watch designs. Now, how is it helping the customer? Of course, it helps reduce. It's not about reducing manual effort. There are people also involved, and there is money spent on this. So it's not just about cost savings. Uh, it does not require you to create physical prototypes. And if you think about this in manufacturing context or furniture, you are also creating a more sustainable process and product life cycle. Also, a lot of organizations are actually testing similarly in manufacturing space. But also, it helps speed up the time to develop. In many cases, the development cycle itself is too long. And we all know today that our attention span is very less. And also, when we think about products, we always are in want of new products, better products. So this also helps actually improve or reduce the time to create new products and services. Now, there are a lot of real-world applications, as I mentioned, of where artificial intelligence is kind of entering into the realm of creativity as well, which could be, as I said, product designing. But we have seen some use cases around even developing of music or other things. They have not been great, I would say. We will still want to have people do it. But at the same time, there are a lot of applications like this where you do not necessarily want to slow down your process. It's also creating an additional layer of making it a more scientific method. You create a watch product or another design, and you know that this is something which has historically not worked. And that is exactly the power of intelligence. So it's not necessarily just about automation. It's more about, even in the creative process, how can this help create that another layer of actually, in terms of certainty that, yes, this has probably worked in the past, and it might work again in future. With that, I think, I'll thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you so much for joining me today.